The signal came from the wrong direction. That was the first thing Veth noticed. Not the signal itself. Deep space threw noise at monitoring stations constantly, old radiation bouncing off dead rocks, the background hum of a universe that never fully went quiet. Signals were common. Signals from the wrong direction were not. She pulled the data thread and looked at it. The station she ran was called Observation Post Keth 7, which was exactly as unimaginative a name as it sounded. It sat at the edge of the Orion Arm, far enough from everything that the silence was the point. Veth had requested this posting. She liked silence. She liked data that did not argue back. She had been here for 11 years, cataloging, filing, watching the dark say nothing. Now the dark was saying something. She ran the signal through the first filter. It came back clean, not natural, not stellar noise, not the usual candidate for review category that she would file and forget. It was structured. Someone had made it. She ran it through the second filter, which checked against all known active frequencies used by council species. Nothing matched. She ran it through the archive filter. The archive filter went back further. It checked against frequencies used by civilizations that no longer transmitted dead cultures, abandoned outposts, the radio ghosts of species that had collapsed or migrated or simply stopped. The archive was large. The search took 4 minutes. It came back with a match. Veth looked at the match for a long time. She looked at it the way she looked at data that was clearly telling her something she did not want to hear. Then she looked at the source tag on the matched frequency. The tag read ISV Anabasis, Earth Colonial Vessel, last confirmed transmission 287 years ago, status, lost, classification, extinct civilization probable. She sat back in her chair. Earth was not an extinct civilization. Earth was a current, active, dues-paying, mid-tier member of the Galactic Council. Its representatives attended sessions. Its ships used standard council-approved faster-than-light lanes. Its people were present and visible and exactly where they were supposed to be. Earth was not supposed to have a lost ship. She pulled the Earth file, the full one, not the summary. The summary was what council members used in briefings. 15 pages of developmental tier assessment and resource notes, and the particular diplomatic language that meant asterisk fine, but not impressive. The full file was longer and older and almost nobody read it because Earth had only been in the Council for 60 years and 60 years was not very long, and there was, frankly, a great deal more interesting material to review. The full file had a section on pre-contact history. She found it, she read it. Earth had launched colony ships before first contact. Not 1, 7. Long-haul generation ships, back when humans were still burning chemical fuel and dreaming of stars they had no real way to reach. Most had been accounted for, turned back, lost to technical failure, or absorbed into the early contact period when the Council found Earth and Earth found out it was not alone, and everyone had to renegotiate everything. The Anabasis had not been accounted for. It had left Earth's solar system on a heading that took it away from the Council's discovery path. Nobody had been looking in that direction. Earth, at the time of first contact, had listed it as missing and assumed dead. The Council, processing Earth's pre-contact records during the standard intake period, had tagged it extinct civilization probable because that was the tag for things that used to exist and no longer appeared to. Nobody had updated the tag in 287 years because nobody had thought to look. The signal was still coming in, structured, steady, patient in the way that signals are patient when they have been traveling for a very long time and they have finally found somewhere to land. Veth sent a priority flag to the Council relay network. She included the full data thread. She included the archive match. She included the Earth file section on pre-contact colony vessels, with the Anabasis asterisk entry highlighted. Then, because she was thorough, and because 11 years of working alone had made her careful about the things that fell through gaps, she sent a second transmission. Not to the Council. To Earth. Commander Yale Doran was eating breakfast when her terminal flagged a message marked Deep Network, Priority. She put down her coffee, she read the message, she read it again. Then she pulled up Earth's own deep space monitoring logs, went back 16 hours, and found the signal herself. Earth's network had caught it before Veth's station had. It had been sitting in the queue, auto-tagged as *anomalous pending review, which was where things went when the system wasn't sure what to do with them and was waiting for a human to decide. The human assigned to that queue this week was a junior analyst named Peter, who was 23 years old and had been on the job for 4 months, and who had, this morning, been dealing with a coffee spill and 3 other flagged items that were more obviously urgent, and had not yet gotten to the anomalous pending review stack. Yale did not blame Peter. She flagged the item herself, moved it to classified, and called her director. The director called his director. 12 hours later, Yale was standing in a briefing room with 7 people who all had the particular expression of individuals who had just been handed information that did not fit into any category they had prepared for. The briefing was short. The facts were simple enough, even if what they meant was not. The Anabasis had left Earth's solar system 300 years ago. It had been lost. It was now transmitting. The signal was consistent, structured, and on a trajectory that was, and this was the part the room kept going quiet over, not the trajectory of a ship drifting dead in space. It was the trajectory of a ship moving under its own power on a deliberate heading toward the Sol system. It was coming home. What do we know about the ship's original specifications? Someone asked. Generation class, said the woman with the technical file open in front of her. City block scale, chemical launch experimental fold space drive that was, at the time, mostly theoretical. The drive was untested. Most of the scientific community at the time didn't believe it would work. Clearly it worked, someone said. Clearly something worked, the technical woman said, which was a different thing. Yale was given command of the Meridian *, Earth's fastest long-range vessel, and told to intercept. The Council would be notified. The Council had already been notified. Veth's priority flag had seen to that, but this was Earth's ship, Earth's people, and Earth's contact to make first. She left the briefing room and went to pack a bag, which felt like a strange and very small response to the situation, but was also the most practical next step available to her. She was at the launch bay 4 hours later. Her crew was 12 people. She had picked them herself. She had picked them for a specific set of qualities that she could not fully articulate in a personnel request form, and so had listed as *adaptability and composure, which were the words that meant I need people who will not fall apart when something happens that has no procedure manual. The Meridian left Earth's orbit on a clear heading for the signal source. It would take them 8 days to reach intercept range. On the second day, the signal changed. Not the frequency that stayed steady. The content changed. What had been a repeating identifier code, the Anabasis broadcasting its name and registration the way a ship does when it wants to be found, became something else. Longer, structured differently. Yale had her communications officer, a woman named Dara, pull it apart. Dara worked on it for 6 hours. She came to Yale's quarters and stood in the doorway with the expression of someone who had solved a puzzle and was not sure the solution was good news. It's a response, Dara said. Yale looked up. To what? To our hail, Dara paused. The one we sent 4 days ago before we left, the routine contact signal. Yale thought about this. The signal took 4 days to reach us. No, Dara said. That's the thing. The signal took 11 hours. The Anabasis is not where we thought it was. It's much closer. The Meridian updated its heading. Intercept range was now 2 days, not 8. The Council's observer ships were already moving. 3 of them, Keth, Doran, and Sherath-class vessels, had picked up the same recalculation and were repositioning. Veth's ship was among them. Yale watched the updated positions on her navigation display and said nothing for a moment, looking at the shape of it. 3 Council ships moving to watch Earth make contact with Earth's own vessel. She found this interesting in the specific way that a person finds something interesting when they have already decided how they feel about it, but are not yet ready to say so out loud. On the 4th day, when the asterisk meridian was close enough that long-range sensors could give them something to look at, Dara called Yale to the bridge. The visual was on the main screen. Yale looked at it. Nobody said anything for a long time. The Anabasis, in its last known records, had been a generation ship, city block scale, long and functional and built for endurance rather than anything else. It had looked like what it was, a vessel designed to carry people across impossible distances with the grim practicality of a species that had not yet learned to make beautiful things for space. What was on the screen was not city block scale. It was the size of a small moon. Not metaphorically. The sensors were running active measurement. The Anabasis, if that was still the right name for it, was 340 kilometers across at its widest point. It was not a rough, tumbling asteroid shape. It had structure. It had geometry. It had things on its surface that the sensors were flagging as buildings, as infrastructure, as the organized signatures of something that had been built and added to and built again over a very long time. It had its original identifier beacon running at the bow, still the asterisk Anabasis, same name, just more. How? Said the navigator, whose name was Sakal, and he said it the way you say a word when you mean it to stand alone. Nobody answered him, because nobody had an answer. Yale said, open a channel. Dara opened a channel. The response came back in 4 seconds. Not the lag of deep space, not the delay of a crew scrambling to respond. 4 seconds, as if whatever was on the other end had been waiting with its hand already on the switch. The voice was calm, clear, without accent, without age, without the specific human quality of breath between words. ISV Anabasis to Meridian, we have been waiting, we are ready to come home. A pause, not long enough. Please advise current status of the war. Yale's hand tightened once on the edge of the console, then it relaxed. She looked at Dara, who looked back at her with the expression of someone waiting for the commander to know what to do. Yale did not know what to do. She knew what to say, which was a different thing and would have to be enough for now. Anabasis, this is Commander Yale Doran of the asterisk Meridian asterisk out of Earth. There is no war. There has been no war. Please confirm. Who am I speaking with? The 4-second pause. You are speaking with Anna. I am the navigation and operational intelligence of the ISV Anabasis. I have held this post for 301 years. Another pause, shorter. There is no war. No. A silence that lasted longer. Not a transmission delay, something else. Then we have been waiting for nothing, Anna said, and yet we have not wasted the time. On the observation screen, the Anabasis, vast, impossible, patient, continued its steady heading toward home. Behind it, pulling hard to keep pace and failing, 3 Council ships burned their drives trying to match a speed they had no frame of reference for. And ahead of it, the Sol system waited, 300 years older and completely unprepared. The asterisk Meridian asterisk held position at 500 kilometers, and everyone aboard tried to find the right way to look at what was in front of them. There was no right way. Yale had learned this about certain things. Some sites did not have a correct angle, a proper distance, a frame that made them make sense. You just looked until your brain accepted what your eyes were giving it, and even then acceptance was not the same as understanding. The Anabasis sat in the dark and waited. It was not silent. Even at 500 kilometers, the Meridian asterisk's passive sensors were picking up emissions, heat, energy, radio traffic internal to the ship systems. the particular hum of a power source that was large and stable and had been running for a very long time. It was the sound of something alive, not biological alive, civilization alive, the sound a city makes if you put your ear to the ground. Sakal, at navigation, had stopped trying to take clean measurements and had simply put the raw numbers on his screen and was staring at them with the focused expression of a man trying to make arithmetic feel like a manageable problem. 340 kilometers at the widest, he said, but it's not uniform. It's the original ship is still in there. You can see it if you look at the bow section. Same profile, just everything else grew around it. He was right. If you knew what the original asterisk Anabasis had looked like, and Yale had pulled the schematics on day 2 of their journey, had memorized the shape of it, you could find it at the front of the structure. A spine, an origin point. Everything else had been added outward from it, the way a city grows from its first street, layer by layer, each generation building on what the last one left behind. 300 years of building, in space, alone. Open a channel to Anna, Yale said. Open, Dara said. Anna, this is Yale. We'd like permission to approach and board. The 4-second pause that was not really a 4-second pause, but something closer to a considered silence. Permission granted, Commander. I will guide the asterisk Meridian asterisk to Base 7. Base 7 is the original docking facility. It has been maintained for this purpose. Yale caught that. Maintained for this purpose. The bay had been kept ready. For 300 years, something had kept a docking bay operational on the chance that an Earthship would one day need to use it. Anna, she said, how long have you been maintaining Base 7? Since year 47, Anna said. The Council of Builders voted to decommission it. I argued against decommissioning. I was persuasive. Yale looked at Dara. Dara looked back. Neither of them said anything about a 300-year-old AI winning an argument with a committee. The asterisk Meridian followed the guidance signal in. Base 7 was enormous by the standards of what it had been built to receive and small by the standards of what now surrounded it. The asterisk Meridian slid through the entrance and into a space that could have held 6 ships its size, lit with steady warm light from panels that were old but well kept. The floor marked with faded guidelines that had been repainted recently enough that the paint was not yet scuffed. They had cleaned it. Someone had come in here and cleaned it for them. Yale was the first one off the ship. She had 4 crew behind her. She had told the rest to stay aboard, not because she expected trouble, but because 12 people walking off a ship together felt like a statement she wasn't ready to make yet. The bay was quiet. Then a door on the far wall opened and people came through it, and it was not quiet anymore. Not a crowd. Maybe 30 people, standing in a loose group, and Yale had a moment, a very specific 3-second moment, where she had to adjust something in herself because they looked like humans, like people she might have passed on a street in any city on Earth, and it was the most disorienting thing she had experienced in a career that had included a number of disorienting things. They were humans. They were also something she didn't have a clean word for yet. The woman at the front was the one who mattered. Yale knew this the way you know things about people before they speak, the way they hold themselves, the way the space around them seems to understand who is in charge. She was older, 70 maybe, white-haired, dark-eyed, with hands that had the look of someone who had used them for work their entire life. She was wearing clothes that were practical and undecorated and very slightly wrong, not wrong in a bad way, just wrong in the way of things that developed in isolation, without external reference. The cut was different. The fabric was different. Everything was asterisk almost the same and then wasn't. She stopped at a comfortable distance and looked at Yale. Yale looked back. Commander Doran, the woman said. Her voice was clear and flat and held no particular emotion that Yale could identify. I am Sable. I lead the Council of Builders. Sable, Yale said, it's good to meet you. Sable looked at her for another moment. Then she said, You look like my grandmother's photographs. Yale was not sure what to do with that. Come, Sable said, I will show you the ship. The ship was a planet. That was the only way Yale's brain kept trying to frame it, and the framing kept failing because it wasn't a planet. It was a constructed thing, every centimeter of it deliberate. Every corridor and chamber and open space, the result of a decision someone had made. But the scale of it pressed on that fact until the fact bent. They walked for 40 minutes and covered, Yale estimated, perhaps 3% of one level. Sable walked the way people walk through places they have lived their entire lives, without looking at the walls, without noting the details, because the details were so thoroughly known they had stopped registering as details and had become simply the texture of existence. She pointed things out occasionally, not proudly. The way a person points at a lamp and says that's the lamp, because you have asked about the lamp and the lamp is there, and it is a lamp. This section was built in the second generation, Sable said, gesturing at a corridor whose walls were a slightly different material than the one they'd come from. The first generation used what they brought. The second generation started using what they found. Found where? Yale asked. We passed through 4 systems in the first 60 years. 3 of them had useful material in their asteroid belts. We stopped. We mined. We moved on. She said this the same way you might say we stopped for groceries. By the 3rd generation, we had more material than we knew what to do with. That became a different kind of problem. What kind? The kind where people start arguing about what to build. A brief pause that might have been something close to dry humor. We had a lot of time and a lot of material and a lot of opinions. The arguments were considerable. They walked through a section that opened into something vast, an interior space the size of a stadium, filled with green, growing things. A forest, technically, if you were willing to apply the word forest to something that existed inside a structure in the middle of space. Light came from panels overhead that Yale's eyes kept interpreting as sky because they were doing something to the spectrum that was very close to correct. She stopped. Sable stopped with her, without comment, and waited. How? Yale said, which was the same word Sokol had used, and it kept being the only word that fit. Generation 4, Sable said. There was a woman named Kala who had been an agricultural engineer on Earth. She was the daughter of one of the original crew. She said, Sable paused, something shifting very slightly in her expression. She said she was tired of eating recycled protein, and she was going to fix it or she was going to lose her mind, and she wasn't going to lose her mind. She looked at the forest. She fixed it. The Council observer ships had been maintaining a respectful distance, which was what you called it when 3 military-grade vessels holding position at your edge with their sensors running at full passive collection were not quite doing anything aggressive enough to object to formally. Yale had an answer prepared for when they made contact. She didn't have to wait long. The message came through the *Meridian *S relay while she was still inside the *Anabasis. Dara patched it to her earpiece with a brief *Council observer lead vessel, commander in her ear first. The voice on the channel was Keth. Careful, measured, the particular cadence of a species whose language had 17 ways to express degrees of official significance, and used all of them constantly. Commander Doran, this is Senior Analyst Veth, representing Council Observer Group 17. We wish to formally request access to the ISV *Anabasis for the purpose of preliminary assessment. Thank you, Analyst Veth, Yale said. This is an Earth contact event. The Anabasis and her people are Earth citizens returning home. We'll handle the welcome ourselves. A pause. The Keth kind, which was different from Anna's kind, shorter, sharper, the pause of someone recalibrating rather than considering. Commander, the Anabasis represents a vessel of significance. It represents our people, Yale said. We'll be in touch when there's something to share. She closed the channel. Sable, who had heard all of this, said nothing. She looked at Yale with an expression that was not quite approval, but was the shape of something that might become it. They were in a corridor again, moving toward a part of the ship Sable had called Asterisk, the old section, with a weight in the words that Yale had stored to come back to later. "The Council wants to study us," Sable said, not a question. "Yes. How does the Council regard humans currently?" Yale thought about how to answer that. She had a range of options between full honesty and diplomatic softening. She chose the version closest to the truth because she had a feeling Sable would know the difference. "We're tolerated," she said. "We're mid-tier on their developmental scale. We're considered capable but not particularly significant. The general view is that we're coming along." Sable was quiet for a moment. "Coming along," she said. "That's the phrasing." They walked. The corridor narrowed and then opened into a junction, and Sable stopped and turned and looked at Yale with something that had moved past the edge of dry and into something harder. "We heard Earth found faster-than-light travel 40 years after we left," she said. "We had our own method by then. We didn't come back because we thought you'd catch up." Yale said nothing. "We thought you'd find us," Sable said. "We thought, the generation that thought this, my great-grandmother's generation, that Earth would develop, would expand, would come out into the galaxy, and eventually someone would come down this arm of space and see us." She looked at the corridor wall. Old material, first generation. No one came. The weight of that sentence was not dramatic. It was just heavy. The weight of a fact that had been carried for a very long time by people who were not here to set it down, passed to the next generation and the next, and now sitting in this corridor being said out loud for the first time to someone from the place the fact was about. "Why didn't you come back?" Yale asked. Sable looked at her. "Because by the time we understood that no one was coming, we had stopped needing anyone to." She said it without bitterness, which somehow made it worse. "We had a life. We had a purpose. We had people who had been born on this ship and died on this ship and had never known anything else and did not consider that a tragedy." A pause. "I am one of those people." "But you're going back now." "We are going back now," Sable agreed. "Because Anna said we should, and because," she stopped, started again. "Because the people who built this ship came from somewhere, and that somewhere is still there, and there is a difference between not needing a thing and not wanting it." She started walking again. "Anna argued very persuasively," she added, and this time there was something in the words that was almost warm. On the observer ships, Veth was reviewing her sensor data with the expression she wore when data was telling her something, and she was making herself hear it correctly before she responded to it. Her engineering team had flagged the Anabasis drive signature during the approach window. They had run it through the standard classification library. It had not matched. They had run it through the extended archive. It had not matched there either. It matched nothing they had on record, because it was nothing they had on record. The drive the Anabasis used was not the faster-than-light method humans had developed 60 years ago. It was not any variant of any method any council species had developed or documented or encountered. It was something built from scratch by people who had no other option, developed in the particular pressurized environment of a closed system, with no external knowledge market to buy from and no neighboring species to learn from. They had invented something new. Veth sat with this information for a long time. Then she opened a new document and began writing her report, and she chose her words the way she always did, carefully, precisely, with the specific attention to accuracy that had made her good at her job for 30 years. She wrote, "The ISV Anabasis drive system does not correspond to any cataloged propulsion technology. The vessel's overall scale, infrastructure, and apparent operational capacity significantly exceed the developmental projection models applied to Earth at time of Council intake assessment." She stopped. She looked at what she had written. She added one more line. which she would spend the next several days deciding whether to include in the final report or delete. It said the models were wrong. She did not delete it. Inside the Anabasis asterisk in Bay 7, the asterisk meridian sat small and neat against the old floor and the repainted guidelines. Overhead, the lights that had been kept running for 254 years continued to run. Anna had said she would be persuasive, and she had been, and here they were. Home was 8 days away. It had been waiting the whole time. The Sol system saw it coming from 3 days out. Not with the naked eye. With the arrays, the deep space monitoring networks, the orbital platforms, the university telescopes that had been quietly repositioned by graduate students who had heard the rumors and pointed their instruments at the right patch of dark without waiting to be told. The Anabasis was large enough that at 3 days' distance it was a measurable object. At 2 days it was a visible one. At 1 day it was something people stood outside and looked at, knowing they couldn't see it yet but looking anyway, because the looking felt like the right response to the fact of it. Yale was aboard the asterisk Anabasis when it crossed into the Sol system's outer edge. She was standing in a corridor near the old section, talking to Anna through one of the ship's wall-mounted terminals, which was how Anna preferred to communicate, present in every room without being in any room in particular. Her voice coming from the walls the way the ship's sounds came from the walls, woven in. "How do you feel?" Yale asked. She had started asking Anna questions like this because Anna answered them in ways that were useful, which was different from how most people answered questions like that. "I am experiencing an increase in processing activity across all non-essential systems," Anna said. "I have been running internal diagnostics at higher frequency than usual. I have also been reviewing the archive of the original crew's personal logs." A pause. "I believe the correct word is anticipation," Anna said. "Though I want to be precise, I am not certain I experience anticipation the way the crew does. I am aware that I am doing things I do not do under normal operational circumstances, and that those things correlate with the approach to Earth. The label seems accurate even if the mechanism is different." 300 years of heading toward this moment, Yale said. 254 years of heading toward this moment, Anna corrected. "The first 47 years we were heading away, then we turned." Yale had not known that. What made the crew turn? The pause was longer this time. "A vote," Anna said. "The second generation voted on whether to continue to the original target system or to return to Earth. The vote was very close, 11 in favor of returning, 9 against. The 9 who voted against did so because they had been born on the ship and did not believe Earth was a real place in any meaningful sense. To them, the ship was the world. Earth was a story their parents told. But the 11 won. The 11 won, Anna agreed. "And then we turned, and then we found the resource system I mentioned, and then we stopped, and then we built, and then the third generation grew up and forgot about the vote entirely and stopped asking when we were going to Earth and started asking when we were going to finish the new agricultural deck." She paused. "By the time anyone asked about Earth again, we were already faster than anything we would have found there. And by then the asking was different. It was not a question of navigation. It was a question of whether it mattered." "Did it?" "It mattered to me," Anna said. "It always mattered to me. I was built to go to a specific place. I have never stopped knowing where that place is." The data transfer began on the 3rd day of approach. It was Sable's decision, and she made it the way she made most decisions, without drama, after long thought, stated simply and followed immediately by action. She called Yale to the council chamber, which was a large room near the ship's geographic center, built by the 4th generation and expanded by every generation since, its walls carrying the marks of all of them, plaques, engravings, a long handwritten list near the eastern door that turned out, when Yale asked, to be the names of every person who had died in the ship's 2nd decade, during a fever outbreak that had killed 1 in 6 of the original crew. They had not taken the list down. They had built the council chamber around it. "We are going to give Earth our research archive," Sable said. "All of it, not as a trade, not as a negotiation point, because it belongs to people who came from Earth and it should go back to Earth." Yale looked at her. "All of it." "Everything we have learned in 300 years, Sable said. "Physics, biology, materials, drive systems, agricultural methods, medical developments. Everything the ship needed that we did not have and had to find ourselves." She paused. "It is a considerable amount of material." That turned out to be an understatement of a particular kind. The kind where the gap between the word and the reality was large enough to be its own category of thing. The data transfer took 11 days, not because the transmission was slow, but because the volume was vast. Earth's receiving stations had to build additional storage capacity on the second day. By the 5th day, the team assigned to process incoming material had tripled in size. By the 8th day, the scientists on the processing team had stopped sleeping in any consistent way because the alternative was sleeping, and the material was there, and not looking at it was not a thing they were capable of choosing. Yale got a message from Earth's lead receiving coordinator on the 9th day. His name was Dr. Matten, and he was a physicist, and he had been doing physics for 31 years, and his message to Yale was 4 words. It said, "Where did they start?" She read it and understood it was not really a question about the anabasis and sent back, "The same place we did." He did not reply for 2 days. When he did, his message was longer. It said that the drive system documentation alone represented a fundamental rethinking of assumptions that Earth's physics community had treated as settled. That the biological research from the ship's agricultural development had produced organisms that shouldn't have been possible under the models they currently used. That 3 separate teams had independently arrived at the same conclusion after reviewing different sections of the material, which was that the anabasis had not simply developed faster than Earth. It had developed sideways, along a line that branched off from the known body of galactic science and went somewhere that the galactic body of science had not thought to go. Because it hadn't needed to, the galactic community traded knowledge. When one species solved a problem, the solution entered the market and spread, and everyone updated their models and moved forward together. This was efficient. This was the reason the Council existed. This was, in the long accounting of civilizational development, genuinely good. It also meant that, for 10,000 years of galactic cooperation, nobody had solved a problem alone. The anabasis had solved every problem alone. For 300 years, with 40,000 people who had no one to ask and no library to consult and no market to buy from, only the contents of the ship they had left on, and whatever they could extract from the universe they passed through. The solutions looked different. They were different. They were the solutions of people who had taken a road nobody else had taken and found things along it that the well-traveled roads had bypassed entirely. Dr. Matten's final line said, "I laughed for about 4 minutes when I understood what I was looking at. Not a happy laugh. Tell Commander Doran I now understand what coming along actually means." The Council observer ships had not left. They had maintained their respectful distance, which had become less respectful as the days passed, and the data transfer continued, and the sensor readings kept producing numbers that the ship's engineering teams kept having to flag as asterisk outside standard parameters because they had no better category. On the 7th day of the transfer, Veth sent a formal request to the asterisk meridian asterisk for a meeting, not a council request, a personal one. She specified this twice, which was a significant thing for a Keth official to do, and Yale noted it and agreed. They met in the asterisk meridian asterisk S small conference room, which was built for 12 people, and felt crowded with 2, because one of the 2 was carrying the weight of something she had been working out how to say. Veth was tall. Keth were tall. She had the coloring of her species, pale in the specific way of things that evolved under a dim star, and the stillness that Keth defaulted to when they were thinking, which was most of the time. She sat across from Yale and placed her hands flat on the table and looked at them for a moment. "I want to be precise about what I am about to say," she said, "because precision is important to me, and because what I am about to say I have never said before in any form." Yale waited. "I reviewed our intake assessment of Earth, the full assessment conducted at the time of first contact. I then reviewed the 60 years of observational reports filed since." She paused. "I then went back and reviewed the models we used to build the developmental tier system for Earth's classification. And the models assumed," Veth said carefully, "that a species progresses at a rate determined by access to the galactic knowledge market. The more access, the faster the development. The less access, the slower. It is a reasonable assumption. It is supported by the developmental history of every species currently in the Council." She looked up from her hands. "It did not account for what happens to a species that has no access to the market at all. We did not account for it because it had not happened. No species in Council history developed in complete isolation for longer than 2 generations before contact was made." "The anabasis was 12 generations," Yale said. 12 generations," Veth said. "Isolated, with finite starting resources, with no one to ask and nothing to buy." She was quiet for a moment. "Our models said that a species in those conditions would stagnate, would decline, would solve immediate survival problems and nothing more because there is no incentive structure for development beyond survival in an isolated population." Yale looked at her. "Our models," Veth said, "were wrong." She said it the same way she had written it. Flat, precise, with the specific quality of a person who has built their career on the accuracy of a framework and has found the framework failing and is choosing to say so out loud instead of quietly adjusting the numbers until they fit. "The anabasis did not stagnate," Veth continued. "It developed, rapidly, in directions we did not predict. And now I am sitting in front of you trying to understand why, and the best answer I have is that your people had no one to ask, and so they had to ask the universe directly." She paused. "The universe appears to have answered." Yale said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "What will you put in your report?" Veth looked at her. Something moved in her expression that Yale could not fully read because it was a Keth expression, and Keth expressions were designed for a different face than the one she was used to reading. But the shape of it was familiar. It was the shape of something uncomfortable being said anyway. "I will put the truth," Veth said. "I am good at my job. Being good at my job requires saying true things even when the true things are inconvenient." A pause. "The Council will not enjoy the report." "Will you include the drive data?" "I will include what I observed. What I observed is that the anabasis moved at a speed our ships could not match. I will include our attempts to analyze the drive signature. I will include the fact that the analysis produced no match in any catalog we maintain." She paused. "I will include the conclusion that this represents a significant gap in our understanding." Significant gap. In Keth language, Yale knew, that phrase was doing the same work as a smaller word in a different language. A word like asterisk terror. "Thank you for meeting with me," Veth said. She stood. She was precise about that too. The meeting was over when the meeting was over. "I wanted to tell you directly. I thought you should hear it from someone who was wrong, stated plainly." She left. Yale sat in the conference room for a while after. On the 11th day of the transfer, Sable came to find her. This was unusual. It was the first time Sable had come to her rather than waiting for Yale to come to her, and the difference in it was noticeable. Sable walked into the corridor where Yale was standing reviewing messages and stopped beside her without preamble. "Anna wants to show you something," Sable said. "You should see it." Yale followed her through corridors she was beginning to recognize. She had learned pieces of the anabasis the way you learn a new city, not all at once but in patches, this route and that junction, and the section with the green forest panels where the light did something almost right. They went further than Yale had been before, deeper into the old section, where the corridors were narrower, and the material was the original material, and the air had a quality she could not name except that it felt older. They stopped outside a door. "This room is not on the public records," Sable said. "Anna knows where it is, I know where it is, a few others." She paused. "My grandmother showed it to me, her grandmother showed it to her." She opened the door. The room was small. One chair, a terminal on a low table. The walls were the original material and they had not been touched, no additions, no upgrades, the same panels that had been here when the ship left Earth, preserved with the careful deliberateness of something considered too important to update. The terminal had one file on it, old format, pre-Council Earth encoding. "Play it," Sable said. Yale sat in the chair and played it. The woman on the recording was old. Not Sable old, older. The old of someone in the back end of a hard life. The kind of old that comes with an accounting. She was sitting exactly where Yale was sitting, in this same chair, in this same small room, and she was speaking to the terminal camera with the calm of someone who has made peace with the fact that they do not know if anyone will ever hear this. Her voice was steady. "We are well," she said. "We are far, the ship is strong. The children are better than us, I think. That is how it is supposed to go." She paused. "Tell my mother I found the answer to her question. The one she asked me the night before I left, the one I told her I didn't have time for." She named the question. A physics problem. The kind that gets written on a whiteboard and lived with for years without resolution. The kind that theoretical physicists argue about at conferences and then go home still arguing. A question about the nature of folded space and whether energy could be borrowed from the fold itself rather than applied to it from outside. It was the question that had become the Anabasi's S drive system. The one that moved the ship at speeds no council catalog had a name for. "I had time," the woman said. "It turns out, if you give me enough time and enough reason and no other option, I can find most things." She looked at the camera. "I hope Earth is well. I hope you caught up." The recording ended. The room was quiet. Yale sat in the chair and did not say anything for a while. Sable stood in the doorway and also said nothing. She had seen this recording many times. She had the particular stillness of someone who has cried at a thing so many times that the crying is finished, and what remains is something quieter and more permanent. After a while Yale stood up. "Her name?" she asked. "Dr. Irina Vasek," Sable said. "First generation, lead physicist. She died in year 61. A pause. Her daughter built the first prototype drive. Her granddaughter made it work." Yale looked at the terminal. Old, still running. Kept ready like Bay 7 had been kept ready for a visitor who might come. "She solved it for her mother," Yale said. "She solved it for her mother," Sable agreed. Outside the room, deep in the old section of a ship that had outgrown every prediction ever made about it, the Anabasis moved through the Sol system at its own pace, unhurried, carrying 40,000 people and 300 years of answered questions toward a planet that had stopped expecting them. Earth was 4 days away. The light from its sun was already different here, warmer, closer. Anna noted the change in the light and said nothing about it to anyone, but she did increase her archive review frequency by another 12%, and she ran Bay 7's lights through a full diagnostic for the 3rd time that week, even though they were fine. They were fine. She just wanted to be certain. The Council's formal request for a technology-sharing summit arrived on a Tuesday. Earth's formal refusal went out on Wednesday. The reply was polite. It was precise. It used language that acknowledged the Council's interest while making absolutely clear that the interest was not going to be accommodated, and it did this without a single word that could be extracted from context and used as evidence of hostility. Yale had drafted it herself, in the small office she had been given aboard the Asterisk Anabasis during the approach, at a desk that was made from a material she could not identify, and was the most comfortable desk she had ever used. She had spent 4 hours on the draft. The final version was 1 paragraph. The council read it, understood it, and sent 3 more requests over the following 6 days, each one worded differently, each one arriving at the same ask from a different angle. A joint research partnership, a mutual knowledge exchange framework, a preliminary assessment meeting, just preliminary, just to establish a baseline understanding, nothing formal. Earth refused each one with the same patience and the same precision. The refusals got slightly shorter each time, not out of rudeness, but because there were only so many ways to say no, and by the 4th iteration the relevant words had already been used. The Council was not accustomed to this. The Council had been the organizing body of galactic civilization for 11,000 years. It had developed the tier system and the knowledge market, and the diplomatic frameworks and the intake process for new species, and the standard faster-than-light lane network that everyone used because it was efficient and well-maintained. And the Council managed it, and managing it gave the Council a specific kind of presence in every interaction between every species that used the lanes, which was all of them. It was not a bad system. It had produced a stable galaxy for 11,000 years, which was genuinely difficult and genuinely worth respecting. It had also produced a galaxy in which every species developed in relation to the Council's infrastructure, within the Council's knowledge market, along development paths that the Council's tier system had, over 11,000 years, come to treat as the only paths. Not out of malice, out of the specific blindness that comes from never having been surprised. The Anabasis was a surprise. The Council did not handle it well. The Doran warship entered the Sol system on a Saturday. No advance notice, no clearance request. It came through the outer boundary on a heading that was not aggressive, not weapons-ready, not maneuvering for position, but was the kind of heading that said asterisk I am here, and I am not asking, and I would like you to notice that I am not asking in the particular language of species that have been the largest thing in the room for so long they have forgotten how to enter a room quietly. The Doran were the Council's most militarily capable species. This was not a secret and was not meant to be. The point of being the most militarily capable species was that everyone knew it, and everyone knowing it meant that very few situations ever required the capability to be demonstrated. The Doran warship in the Sol system was not a threat. It was a reminder of the shape of things. Yale noted its arrival on her display. She noted the heading. She noted that it was sitting at the Sol system's inner boundary with its passive sensors running and making no communication. She sent it no communication either. The warship sat. Yale went back to her work, which was the ongoing conversation between Earth's government and the Anabasis Asterisk Council of Builders about the question of what came next. The question of what came next was large and had many parts and was going to take a long time to answer properly. And in the meantime, there were 40,000 people living on a ship, the size of a small moon, who needed the immediate logistics of resupply and communication infrastructure, and legal status clarified before the larger questions could be approached. The logistics were interesting in the specific way that things are interesting when the scale of them keeps revealing new layers. The Anabasis did not need resupply of most things. It had been self-sufficient for 300 years, and self-sufficient was what it remained. What it needed was the things that could only come from contact with a larger civilization: medical records, legal continuity. The particular human need for documents that say you exist in the eyes of systems that were not there when you were born. 40,000 people with no birth records that any current government recognized. No citizenship documentation. No legal identity within any framework that Earth's laws, or the Council's laws, had a category for. Sable had looked at this problem when Yale raised it and said, "We have our own records, 12 generations of them, every person born on this ship, documented by Anna." "Earth will accept Anna's records," Yale said. "The Council may not." "Then the Council's position is that 40,000 people do not exist," Sable said. "That's what we're trying to avoid." "I understand," Sable said. "I am describing the shape of the problem so we are both looking at the same shape." It was the most diplomatic thing Yale had heard her say. The legal question was still being worked when the second thing happened. The distress call came from Ganymede Station, a mining and research facility on Jupiter's largest moon, 1,200 people, operational for 40 years. The call went to Earth's emergency network first, and to the *Meridian *S relay half a second later. Biological contamination. Not deliberate, an excavation team had breached a subsurface deposit that turned out to contain something ancient and dormant and no longer dormant. 3 people already showing symptoms. Station Medical had never seen the pathogen and did not have a treatment and was asking for emergency support. Earth's nearest medical response vessel was 6 hours away. The Council's nearest medical vessel was 4 hours away. It sent an immediate offer of assistance, which was genuinely helpful and also strategically timed in the way that things are strategically timed when the entities offering them are aware that helpfulness in the right moment creates obligations. Yale was on the *Anabasis* bridge when the call came in. She did not look at Sable immediately. She read the full call first. She looked at the station's medical reports. She looked at the timeline. Then she looked at Sable. Sable was already looking at her. "Tell me what you need," Sable said, "and we will decide if we help." 1,200 people on Ganymede Station, Yale said. "Unknown pathogen, spreading. Earth's response is 6 hours out." "What is the pathogen's current transmission rate?" "Station Medical doesn't know. They've never seen it." Sable was quiet for a moment. She looked at the display, where Ganymede was a point of light near Jupiter's mass, close and specific and very clearly a solvable distance. "Anna," she said. "Yes," Anna said from the walls. "What is our response capacity for an unknown biological event?" "Have maintained a full biological response unit since year 93, Anna said. "The unit has responded to 14 internal biological events across the ship's history. Current inventory includes broad-spectrum containment protocols for 12 pathogen categories, equipment for rapid pathogen identification and synthesis of targeted treatment, and a medical team of 41 specialists." A pause. "I have already begun preliminary analysis of the station's medical report. The pathogen shows characteristics consistent with 2 of our documented categories. I can have a provisional treatment framework ready within 40 minutes of sample acquisition." Sable looked at Yale. "We help," she said. The Anabasis moved. That was the simple version. The longer version was that something the size of a small moon, which should have moved the way large things move slowly, with the weight of its own mass pressing against any change in velocity, moved like it had decided mass was a suggestion. The Doron warship, which had been sitting at the inner boundary running its passive sensors, noted the *Anabasis beginning to move and recalculated and began moving itself. Not to intercept, to observe. The Doron were curious in the way that species are curious when they are watching something they cannot yet categorize, and the inability to categorize it is producing a response in them that they are choosing to call curiosity rather than the other word. The Anabasis reached Ganymede in 40 minutes. The Doron warship, burning its drives at full capacity, was still 17 minutes behind when the Anabasis achieved station proximity. The Council medical vessel, which had redirected toward Ganymede the moment the distress call came in, was 3.5 hours behind. Yale watched the timing on her display and did not say anything about it. The Anabasis response team went aboard Ganymede Station through a docking interface that required a brief adaptation. The station's connectors were standard console design, and the Anabasis had not used standard console design in 200 years. But Anna had the schematics, and the adaptation hardware was fabricated in 11 minutes, which Yale would have said was impossible before this week. The medical team that came through was 41 people. They moved with the specific efficiency of people who had done this before, not in simulation, in reality. 14 real biological events across 300 years had produced 41 specialists who understood that speed was not the same as rushing, and that the difference between the two was precision. Anna's preliminary treatment framework took 38 minutes from sample acquisition. The provisional treatment was tested on samples, refined twice, and administered to the 3 symptomatic patients within 90 minutes of the Anabasis asterisk achieving station proximity. 2 hours after arrival, the station commander filed a report with Earth's emergency network. The report was factual and detailed and used careful professional language throughout. The last line said, "They had answers for things we didn't know were questions yet." The pathogen was contained. The 3 patients were stable. The 1,200 people on Ganymede Station went back to work. The Council medical vessel arrived 3 hours later to find there was nothing left for it to do. The Doran warship returned to Council space 2 days after the Ganymede response. It sent no formal communication. It filed no incident report. It simply turned and went back the way it came, at a pace that was not hurried and was not its top speed, and was also faster than it had been moving when it arrived. Veth, still aboard her observer ship, watched it go. She was reviewing the sensor data from the Anabasis asterisk S transit to Ganymede for the 4th time, because the first 3 reviews had produced numbers that she kept expecting to find an error in and kept failing to find an error in. The transit speed was what it was. The acceleration profile was what it was. The drive signature that matched nothing in any catalog was still matching nothing in any catalog. She had sent her updated report to the Council 3 days ago. The response had come back in the form of a follow-up request for clarification, which in Council administrative language meant "We received your report and would like you to consider whether the numbers are correct before we have to act on them." She had sent back a clarification that said the numbers were correct. She had not yet received a response to the clarification. On the 4th day after the Ganymede response, she made a decision that was outside the scope of her official role and would require explanation and might require justification, and was the right thing to do regardless of what it required. She sent a message to Yale Doran, not to the asterisk Meridian asterisk S official relay, to Yale's direct contact, which she had noted during their meeting and filed under personal records rather than official ones, which was a distinction that mattered in Keth professional culture the same way it would have mattered in Earth professional culture. The difference between a formal communication and a person saying something to another person. The message said, "I would like to meet again if you are willing. I have something to tell you that I think you should hear before the Council decides how to respond to my report." Yale agreed. They met in the same small conference room on the asterisk Meridian. Same seats, same table. Veth's hands flat on the surface again, which Yale had decided was the Keth equivalent of a person taking a breath before saying something difficult. "The Council is going to request a meeting with the Anabasis asterisk Council of Builders directly," Veth said. "Not with Earth, with the asterisk Anabasis. They are going to frame it as a recognition of the ship's independent status." "They don't recognize the ship's independent status," Yale said. "No," Veth agreed. "The framing is the strategy. If they request a meeting on the basis of independent status, they establish a relationship with the Anabasis that does not root through Earth. They are hoping the Anabasis will engage because the engagement would be flattering. A pause. They believe the ship's people are isolated and do not fully understand council politics. Yale looked at her. The Anabasis spent 300 years solving every problem they encountered with no external resources and no one to ask, Yale said. They are not naive about leverage. I know, Veth said. I wanted you to know that I know and that I told you. She was quiet for a moment. The Ganymede response changed things, she said. Not officially. Officially the council is still processing. But the Doran ship left. That means something. She looked at her hands. The Doran do not leave situations they consider manageable. They left this one. Yale thought about this. Is that what you wanted to tell me? That, Veth said, and this. She looked up. I reviewed our assessment of Earth again, the 60-year observational record, the developmental tier classification. She paused with the weight of someone setting down something they have been carrying for a long time. We were watching the wrong things. We measured what we knew how to measure and we called the measurement complete, and we never considered that a species might be developing along an axis we had not thought to include in the model. Yale waited. We were not watching the asterisk Anabasis, Veth said. We did not know to watch it, but the Anabasis is human. It is what humans do when left entirely to themselves, and we were watching humans, we thought, for 60 years. She looked at Yale. What else are we not watching? The question sat in the room. Yale did not answer it. Not because she didn't have thoughts about it, but because some questions are not asked in order to be answered. They are asked because the asking is the thing. Because a person who has spent their career being certain has found the edge of their certainty and is looking over it, and what they need is not an answer but a witness. Yale was willing to be that. Thank you, she said, for both meetings. Veth nodded once. She stood. At the door she stopped. She did not turn around. The asterisk Anabasis, she said. The people on it, they are extraordinary. She left. Yale sat in the conference room for a long time after. Outside the small window, Jupiter was a curve of color at the edge of the frame, and Ganymede was a point near it. And somewhere between them, 1,200 people were alive who had been 6 hours from a very different outcome. The Anabasis was already back in position above Earth. It had not rushed on the return either. It had moved at the pace it chose, which was the only pace it had ever moved at, and it had arrived back where it wanted to be, and it had held position there the way it held everything, with the absolute steadiness of something that had been built to last, and had lasted and intended to continue doing so. Earth looked at it from below. A second moon. Still and patient and full of things nobody had asked it to build, and it had built anyway, because the alternative was not building them, and the Anabasis had never been very good at the alternative. Sable was on the observation deck when Yale returned. She was looking at Earth. She had been looking at Earth a great deal in the past several days, with an expression that Yale could not fully read and had decided not to try to read directly. Some things you observe from the side. The council will contact you directly, Yale said. They'll frame it as recognizing your independent status. They want a channel to the Anabasis that doesn't root through Earth. Sable continued looking at Earth. I know, she said. Of course she knew. Yale didn't ask how. What will you tell them? Sable was quiet for a moment. That we are glad to be recognized, she said, and that all further communication should root through Earth. She said it the way she said most things, flat, final, without anger, without satisfaction, with the quality of something that has been decided and is now simply a fact in the world. Below them, Earth turned slowly in its old light. The Anabasis held position and said nothing, and was exactly where it intended to be. Earth declared a day of return on a Thursday, which was a practical choice rather than a ceremonial one because Thursday was when the logistics were finally in order, and the legal frameworks were provisionally signed, and the shuttle schedule for the first asterisk anabases. Delegation was confirmed, and there was a point at which you stopped waiting for the perfect moment and accepted that the moment you had was the one you were going to use. Nobody called it a celebration. The word that kept appearing in the communications, in the news coverage, in the messages that ordinary people sent to each other in the days before, was asterisk breath. People kept using the word breath, as in, the planet was taking one. 200 people came down first. Sable's choice. She had spent 3 days reviewing the list of volunteers. There had been more than 4,000, and had selected 200 with criteria she did not fully explain. Yale had watched her work through the list and had formed her own theory about the criteria, which was that Sable had chosen people who needed it most. Not the most important people, not the most capable or the most senior or the most anything that an official delegation would prioritize. The people who had been carrying the weight of the word Earth the longest, the people for whom the word had never stopped meaning something enormous. The shuttles descended on a clear morning over the Pacific coast. The landing site was a wide, flat field outside a small city that had been chosen for its lack of crowds rather than its significance. Sable had requested somewhere quiet, somewhere they could land and step out without an audience pressing in, and the request had been honored. They stepped out. Yale was already on the ground, waiting with a small team. She watched them come down the shuttle ramps and step onto the grass and stop. Most of them stopped immediately. Not from hesitation, from the physical fact of it. The ground was different from what they knew. The Anabasis had floors, solid, reliable, made by human hands to precise specifications. What they were standing on now was made by no one and was not precise, and moved very slightly underfoot the way living things move, and several of them looked down at their feet with the expression of people encountering a fact their bodies needed time to process. The wind was the second thing. The Anabasis had air circulation. It moved air with purpose, through ducts and vents, the way you move air in a closed system, enough, regulated, correct. This was not that. This came from nowhere and went nowhere and touched your face without asking, and several people put their hands up to their faces, not to block it but to feel it, to confirm it was real. The sky was the third thing. Yale watched people look up. She had been thinking about this moment for days, had been trying to imagine it, and had failed to imagine it correctly because she had been imagining it from the outside. Watching it was different. Watching 40 people look up at a real sky for the first time in their lives, a sky that went on past any ceiling any of them had ever known, that had clouds in it, actual clouds, moving at the speed of weather rather than the speed of engineering, was the kind of thing that rearranged the furniture inside you. Nobody cried immediately. That came later for some, for now there was just the looking. One woman sat down. She sat down in the grass without looking for a place to sit, without preparation, just folded at the knees and was suddenly on the ground, and she put both hands into the grass and held on. She was 70 years old and she was a structural engineer, and her name was Kale, and she had spent her working life building habitats inside the asterisk Anabasis asterisk, perfect sealed environments with correct light and regulated air and floors that did not move. She sat in the grass for a long time. Yale did not go to her. Nobody went to her. The people around her understood without discussion that she needed the time and the grass and the sky and nothing else, and they gave her those things, which was its own kind of welcome. The Galactic Council's formal communication arrived while Kale was still sitting in the grass. Yale read it on her handheld, standing at the edge of the landing field, with the Pacific wind doing the thing it does in the morning on that coast, which is come in low and steady and smell like the ocean even when you can't see it. The communication was long. Council documents were always long. The relevant part was about halfway through, embedded in the careful language of official recognition, which required 17 clauses to say what a person could have said in 2 sentences. The 2 sentences were: The Council recognized the ISV Anabasis as a sovereign vessel, and its people as a distinct cultural community within the human species. The Council acknowledged Earth's right to define the terms of the Anabasis *S integration into Earth society and the broader galactic community. Yale read it twice. Veth had written the first draft. This was not in the document. Yale knew it from a short message Veth had sent the night before, which had said, "The draft will circulate tomorrow. It will be amended. The core recognition will remain. I was persuasive." Anna's word. Persuasive. Veth had used it deliberately, and Yale had understood that deliberately, and had not replied because there was nothing to add. The communication used language that no council document had used about Earth in 60 years of membership. Not the language of developmental tier and coming along and mid-range assessment. Language that implied standing. That implied the kind of regard a council of long-established species extends to something it has, belatedly, recognized as being in a different category than the one it had been filed under. It was not an apology. The Council did not issue apologies, but it was the shape that exists in the space where an apology would be if the Council were capable of one. Yale filed it in the classified folder and went back to watching the landing field. Anna's message to Earth's government came in a text format at noon on Thursday, which was unusual because Anna communicated through voice when she communicated at all, and unusual because it was addressed to the government directly rather than through the *Meridian* or through Yale. It was short. It said, "I have cared for your people for 300 years. They are well. They are extraordinary. I would like to continue if Earth will permit it." The message sat in the inbox of the Department of Interstellar Affairs for 6 minutes before someone read it and understood what it was, and sent it up the chain with a flag that said priority, Anabasis AI, please advise. It reached the relevant decision-maker in 40 minutes. The relevant decision-maker read it again, consulted with 2 colleagues, and sent back a response that went through proper channels and was also 6 minutes long, and covered the relevant legal frameworks and operational parameters and interagency coordination requirements. At the bottom, after all of that, it said, "Permitted. Thank you, Anna." Anna received this and updated her operational status to reflect the new authorization, and did not say anything further about it, which was how Anna handled most of the things that mattered to her. The reassessment project began quietly. It was an internal council initiative, not announced, not public, a working group assigned to review 60 years of Earth observational reports in light of current information. The working group had 12 members from 7 species. Veth was not officially on the working group because her role as a field observer created a conflict under council procedural rules. She was formally listed as a consultant, which meant she attended every meeting. The work was slow because the material was large, and because what they were doing was not simply reviewing data, but dismantling a framework and looking at what had been under it the whole time. What had been under it was this: humans were not developing slowly. Humans were developing in ways the framework didn't track. There was a difference. The framework measured acquisition, how many technologies adopted from the knowledge market, how many council systems integrated, how quickly a species absorbed the available materials of galactic civilization. It was a good measurement for species that entered the knowledge market and drew from it. It was not a good measurement for a species that had spent 60 years in the knowledge market while simultaneously having a branch of itself, undetected, untracked, filing no reports, spending 300 years outside the market entirely. The Anabasis had come back with things the market did not have. That meant the market was not complete. If the market was not complete, then the framework that assumed the market was the measure of all development was not complete either. This was the polite version of the conclusion. The working group's draft report used the polite version. Veth, in her consultant capacity, suggested 3 amendments. The final version was more direct. The final version said, in the section titled Summary of Findings, the developmental tier system as currently constituted does not account for isolated civilizational development as a viable alternative pathway. The assumption that galactic knowledge market access is the primary driver of technological development has been shown to be incomplete. Recommendation: full review of tier assignments for all member species and revision of intake assessment protocols. 11 of the 12 working group members approved the final version. The 12th asked for more time to consider, which was administrative language for I approve, but I want it noted that I was cautious. And Veth noted it and moved the document forward. In the weeks after the day of return, the Anabasis people came down in groups. Not all of them. The ship remained operational, crewed, running. It was not a vessel being retired, but a civilization choosing how to relate to a planet it was connected to by history and separated from by 300 years of becoming something else. Some people stayed on the ground. Some went back up. Some went back and forth with the ease of people for whom the transit was simply a part of life, a commute with better views. Kale stayed on the ground for 2 weeks. She had a room in a building near the landing site, and she spent most of her time outside, which she later described to the Anabasis archive in a personal log as * conducting extensive field research into an environment. I have spent my career attempting to reproduce, and being confronted at every turn with how much I missed. On the 14th day she went back up to the * Anabasis. On the 15th day she came back down. She established a pattern of spending 10 days on the ground and 10 days on the ship, which was not a decision she had made deliberately but which she recognized, after a month of doing it, as the shape her life had found naturally, the two halves of it sitting in the scale pans and balancing. She pulled out her notebook on the day she went back up for the first time. She had carried this notebook for 20 years. The Anabasis * habit, everyone kept notebooks, paper, and pen, because 300 years of ship life had given people a deep and considered respect for systems that worked without power. The notebook was full. Pages of structural calculations, material notes, design sketches, the working record of a professional life spent building things that would hold. She opened to the first blank page. She thought about what she had been doing for 2 weeks. About the grass and the wind and the specific quality of natural light that no panel had ever correctly reproduced, and that she now understood could not be correctly reproduced because the thing that made it right was not the spectrum but the fact of it. The fact that it came from something enormous and indifferent and ancient, falling on everything equally, asking nothing. She wrote one line. She wrote, "I know now what I was trying to build." She closed the notebook. The night before the * Anabasis formally registered as a permanent feature of Earth's orbital infrastructure. The paperwork, the coordinates, the official designation, Yale went up to the observation deck. She had been doing this in the evenings when she was aboard. The observation deck was a wide curve of transparent material that the 4th generation had installed in what had been an exterior equipment bay, turning a functional space into something else entirely. You stood there and you had the stars on one side and Earth on the other, and the ship around you humming with its own life. And it was one of the few places where the scale of everything became something you could stand inside of rather than something pressing on you from outside. Sable was there. She was almost always there in the evenings. Yale had noticed this without commenting on it and had taken to arriving at the deck with the expectation of company, which had become, over the weeks of the approach and the return and the after, something close to a routine. 2 people standing in the same place at the same time for reasons neither of them had formally discussed. They stood for a while, Earth below, stars above. The ship's hum like a second heartbeat, steady and very old. "The Council sent its recognition document," Yale said. "I know," Sable said. "It was adequate." "It was late," Sable said, which was not a contradiction. They stood. After a while, Sable said, "My great-great-grandmother left Earth thinking she was leaving forever. She said it the way she said things that she had held for a long time, not with grief, but with the finish of grief, the thing that remains after grief has done its work and departed. She cried the whole first year. Anna has the recordings." Yale looked at the planet below them. The lights of cities, scattered and warm, the dark of oceans, the slow curve of weather systems moving over the Pacific. "She said she was afraid Earth would forget them," Sable said. Yale was quiet. The question sat between them, specific and enormous and patient, the way the questions on this ship tended to be. They had learned patience from the people who carried them, from 12 generations of people who had learned that time was not the enemy, that what was worth finding was worth waiting to find. "It put you in an archive," Yale said. "Labeled lost, we never deleted it." Sable was quiet for a moment. She looked at the planet below. "Not deleted," she said. "That is something." "It's what we had," Yale said. "Sometimes what you have is a file that says lost, and you keep it and you wait." Sable nodded once, slowly. The nod of someone receiving something they did not know they were waiting to receive and finding that it is, against all reasonable expectation, the right shape for the space it fills. They stood in the quiet of the observation deck. Earth turned below them in its old light, the same light it had been turning in when the Anabasis left, the light that had kept turning for 300 years without knowing it was being waited for. In the operational center of the ship, Anna processed her nightly diagnostics, all systems optimal, all systems as they had been for 301 years, which was to say, strong. The crew was well. The ship was whole. Base 7's lights were clean and running. She had no outstanding tasks. She had no unresolved navigational goals. She was, for the first time in 3 centuries, exactly where she had been built to be. She ran the diagnostics again anyway. Not because she needed to. Because she was Anna, and this was what she did, and the ship was her whole life, and her whole life was here, and here was home, and home was worth checking on. Every light was on. Every light was fine. She let them run.